Hi, welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli. And we publish these episodes of these interviews every Friday. And if you don't want to miss one, please sign up at paparelli.com. All you have to do is submit your email address and you'll not miss an episode. And as a bonus, you'll get a blog every Tuesday morning that I write about me and about entrepreneurs. I am an angel investor and have been for the last 25 years in the city, in the greater Atlanta area. And during that time, I've talked to hundreds of entrepreneurs, and they have taught me over those years how to start companies from scratch and how to grow them into very valuable assets. And what is so great in what we've done here with the Charlie Paparelli Show is to get entrepreneurs on, and I help them tell their stories. And it's through these stories that there's so many lessons to be learned on how to start your company. And if you already have one, how to grow it into something very, very valuable and fulfilling for you. Our title today is Entrepreneur for Jesus. This is a little bit unusual than what I've done, but we have an entrepreneur on who is sold out for Jesus Christ and has devoted his life to Christ. And his name is Terry Brown. He is the country director of Leader Impact, which in the Czech Republic, which is a subsidiary of Cru, which is formerly Campus Crusade for Christ. I met Terry through a friend of mine, Bruce Cook, who used to be with Campus Crusade like 40 years ago. But Bruce is a mentor of mine, and he has brought me along not only in my faith walk, but as a business person. He is an entrepreneur who has his own business. Yet he stays in touch with the guys from Cru and the leaders from Cru. And he brought me in and he asked, would I be willing to give a talk by working with Terry Brown, my guest, over to the countries that Terry is involved with over there in Europe. And so I'm going to be giving a talk on business to 7 different countries over in Europe. And maybe I'll even publish that sometime. But Terry has a really interesting background, and I'm very excited about talking to him. But he is a true entrepreneur. But his mission is very different in that it's not a business mission, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned here. So welcome, Terry. I'm so glad that you're here with me.
Charlie, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, So Terry, tell me about your title and your responsibilities in case I mess that up so that people know where you are.
No, that's a good question. I'm the director for Leader Impact in the Czech Republic. And my major responsibility is to direct the work that we call Leader Impact there, which is to business and professional entrepreneur people. And our basic focus is to help leaders develop from the inside out. And we start with the spiritual and work out from there. And so that's been our mission there in the Czech Republic.
Okay. And where are you now? You in the Czech Republic now?
I'm in Columbia, South Carolina right now. We have a home here in Columbia, South Carolina. We claim this is our home now. And so we periodically come back here. My wife and I are here for a couple of months on a short furlough, and we'll be going back to the Czech Republic in July.
How long have you been in the Czech Republic?
Since 1995. We've been there a good while.
25 years.
25 years.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. I guess we're going to get to that a little bit. So now that you're in Columbia, is that where you grew up?
Well, it's not. I actually grew up in northeastern Arkansas in a little city called Blytheville, Arkansas. It's right on the Mississippi River. It's Mississippi Delta land, the farming country there, cotton and soybeans. I grew up in a farming family. And so I went to school at the University of Arkansas, and that's how I got involved.
How many acres did your dad have when you were growing up?
Well, my granddad was the landowner. He owned about 1,500 acres and still does. The family still owns the land there. And my uncle
they still farming it?
They still farm it. And they're good size. My uncle farms the land. And so
I get your uncle?
It's kind of an unusual story. My uncle is 9 months older than me.
Okay, now we're getting back to Arkansas. Go ahead.
We grew up together, and my grandmother he was a surprise baby.
Oh, okay.
My mother is their oldest daughter, and so everybody was a little surprised when she got pregnant.
How did all that work? I mean, that would be difficulty. That whole thing about estates and things of that nature. So you got your grandfather, and how many kids did he have?
He had three.
3 kids, one of which was your mom, dad?
My mother is the oldest daughter in his family.
Okay. So when he was looking to pass the farm on, and all that, how did you escape not becoming a farmer? Because everybody gets, that's the reason to have kids when you're a farmer, right? Is you have free work, right? All we have to do is feed you.
You got free labor right there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So what was your childhood like? Did you work the farm?
I did. I spent many an hour on tractor. I never wanted to be a farmer. I knew at an early age I didn't want to be a farmer.
Why is that? Now say something nice about farmers, okay?
It's great work. I just knew for me, that's not what I thought was for me. And actually, I went to the university to become a doctor. I was a chemistry pre-med student at the University of Arkansas.
When did you come up with that idea that you should be a doctor?
Well, I'd always been interested.
First of all, why did you know you weren't going to be a farmer? Why was this is not for me?
I think that even at a young age, I felt like that I became a Christian at a young age. I grew up in a Christian home. And I think I felt like at an early age that even though I didn't understand it real clearly, that God had something else for me. That even at an early age, I sensed that maybe the Lord wanted me to do something other than be a farmer. It's nothing against farming. I think it's a great work, great vocation.
Did you have other siblings that were drawn to it?
I have a sister. I have a younger sister.
But was she drawn into the whole farming life?
She wasn't. She married a doctor.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So even all your siblings, you and your other 2 siblings, none of you got into farming.
Only my uncle. He farms all the land right now.
And he's your sister. He's your mother's brother?
Yeah, it's my mother's youngest brother. Brother.
The youngest. Okay.
The youngest.
Out of how many kids there?
I'm sorry?
How many kids did your grandfather have?
He had 3. He had 2 girls and a boy. And my uncle was the last one. He was about 25 years after they had stopped, supposedly with kids. So it was a surprise when they had him.
Well, think of it from your grandfather's standpoint, saying, look, nobody seems to be interested in this farm. And here's this surprise baby comes along, a son, and he becomes the person who actually takes over this legacy from your grandfather. I just love it how God works that way, Surprise babies, and I was one, okay? Uh-huh. It's I remember my mother tells the story that she went to the doctor, and doctor said, you're pregnant. And she was like 42. And she said, there's just no way, because she had this whole string of miscarriages. And so there's a difference between me and my sister of 11 years. And here's what I was this surprised. So God had a plan for me. When you're the surprise baby, you just know God has a plan for you. And
that's
certainly
true.
Your uncle lived out that plan.
I think for me, there would have been a lot of pressure on me to take over the farm if it had not been for him. That would have been something I would have really struggled with. So it actually opened the door for me to move in a different direction if I wanted to. And my grandfather was fine with that. So I think God had a plan in that.
Isn't that cool that you would have been a farmer today had not your uncle been born?
Probably so.
Because you would have been loyal, I'm sure, to your family and said, okay, I guess I got to do it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's where you would have been.
Yeah. It's a good vocation. They make good money. Those farms make good money.
I'm not saying that, but it's got to be something there's a lot of good vocations, as you say, occupations and careers, but they're not good for everybody.
That's right. That's right.
So it's there are a lot of farmers, I'm sure, that their kids took over the farm and they just do it because they're still loyal to their fathers or their grandfathers.
It's very normal for people to do that. Where I'm from, it's very normal for people
Isn't
to
that
do that.
something? Well, good for you. So you knew that there was something. So tell me about this. You said, I grew up in a Christian household and I knew Jesus early. What was that all about? What does it mean to know Jesus early to you? What is that?
Well, that's a really good question, Charlie. I think for me, I became a Christian when I was about 10 years old. We were in church every Sunday. I never missed a Sunday. My parents always had me there. And when I made a decision for Christ at an early age, I didn't have a clue how to grow as a Christian. I mean, I thought you go to church.
What did that even mean? Tell me the story of. So I understand when the church is open, you're there. I've heard that story from a lot of Christians, particularly in the South, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what actually happened? It sounds like there was a lot of pressure for you to kind of, or I shouldn't say it that way. You're in a slipstream, right? I mean, this is what your parents believe. This is what your kids, your brothers and sisters believe. This is what your grandfather and grandmother believe. And it's like, well, okay, I guess I must believe too. So what happened at 10 years old?
It's really interesting, though. My grandfather was a lifelong non-Christian. He would have nothing to do with the church. The farmer, nothing to do with the church. He was absolutely opposed to Christianity. He didn't have anything to do with it. And it's odd that my mother was the one in that family that became a Christian and was a committed Christian. And
really?
Out of that, yeah.
Okay.
And, for me, I understood what I was doing.
When she married your father, was he a Christian?
He was not. He became a Christian after they married. And, but they were both, in their marriage, they made a commitment early to be involved in a church. They were both committed believers. They actually were performers. My mother actually has some CDs. Her family they did music when they weren't farming. In the off times, my granddad had a musical group, and my mother was the lead singer in that group. And it's interesting. My granddad, that's how he bought farmland. From money they made on that, he bought up farmland, and he accrued farmland through what they made from this music. They had a radio station. They had a radio program on a radio station there. They were pretty well known in that area, And so, but my mother was a performer. She was sang. My dad was a guitarist, professional guitarist. And so once they were married, they left show business forever. And my dad began to farm with my grandfather. And in their off times, they would sing a lot in churches, revivals, all over the place.
Okay.
Funerals, you name it. They were always, and they were good. They were good.
Your mother brings your father to Christ. And then they both commit to then say, we're going to have children. We're going to raise them as Christians.
That's right. They had us in the church every Sunday.
So that's what you grew up in. What kind of, this is an odd question, but I just came to mind is, what impact did your grandfather's, lack of faith, or I don't know if he was against it to the point where he was very vocal against it, or he was just quietly against it, right? What impact did that have on you as you were growing up as a kid? Because grandfathers they can have influence in a community in a family like that, for sure.
That's a really interesting question. My grandfather was like a second dad to me. I mean, we grew up about 1 mile apart, so I saw him constantly. Mm-hmm. And we hunted together. I drove the tractor on the farm. We had a close relationship. It's interesting that I never was, and he was not. He was openly, he wasn't the enemy of the church, but he was critical of the church and anything related to Christianity.
Oh, he was. He wasn't quiet about it. That's what I'm saying. He had an anti-piece to him.
He was anti, and he thought he was very cynical about spiritual things and stuff. But it never seemed to affect me. I don't know why. That's a good question. I don't know.
Because
I can
you
answer
respected him in a lot of other areas, I'm sure.
Absolutely, I loved him as like a second father to me. But it never affected my own faith.
Did you ever go home to Mom and say, "Mom, Grandpa's saying these things to me, are these right?
I never told my mother half the things he said. She would have died if she'd known some of the things he told me. He would tell off-color jokes about, my mother would have died if she knew some of the stuff he said to me. But he was a great man in my life. I had a great respect.
But you were convicted in your faith. You just said, I know that what I believe is right, and I know what he believes is not right.
At an early age, I seemed to have that conviction, and I can't explain why. I didn't know much about the Bible, really, as a young guy. I went to church every Sunday, but after I made a decision, you asked me the question, how did I become a Christian?
Yeah, tell me that decision. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Excuse me, I'm kind of dry here. I'd heard the gospel many times. A little Southern Baptist church, I heard the gospel many times. But there was a special service. They would have what they call revivals, where they bring in a guest like speaker. And it was a particular night when he spoke. What was the
purpose of those revivals?
Well, they actually were in the church where I grew up. It was a little country Baptist church. I grew up in a small farming community. It was very much evangelistic. They would bring in someone to try to bring in outside people into the church to hear the speaker. And when he spoke the night that I was there,
so I don't know why. It wasn't just for people that were Christians. It was basically for evangelism. It was for bring in. What is that where we hear that word evangelism? What does that mean?
It means he would share, excuse me, he would talk about how a person could know Jesus Christ in a personal way, how he could become a believer, how he could, through a relationship with Christ, could be forgiven of their sins, could have eternal life. And he would preach those type of sermons. It was a week-long revival. And the pastor
the church people in a revival, the church people, in other words, the normal attendees, the members, they would invite friends and associates to come in that maybe don't have this, what you call personal relationship with Christ, right?
That's exactly right.
And then you'd have this outside guy who would give the presentations, in effect.
It's kind of like hearing somebody you don't normally hear. Maybe it might have a little greater impact.
Which gives you a reason to kind of invite people so that it's not the same old preacher that everybody knows and has already discovered, right?
And, it touched my life. I heard these sermons all the time in church, but this guy, he wasn't anything special. But the night he spoke, I think God just touched my life. It's like, this is something that I needed to do personally. I didn't, it wasn't just enough for me to go to church and be in a Christian family.
So what at 10 years old, first of all, what was that guy's name? Do you remember?
I don't. That's a good
question. Isn't that something? Okay. So what is what was the catalyst there? That said, because you were literally soaking in this stuff, right?
Yeah.
All right, soaking in it. And then at some point it was like, boom. It's like, all of a sudden I need to do this. What made you need to do it at 10 years old?
You know what? My opinion is, in looking back, the Holy Spirit just worked in my life that night. It was because I had heard it many times before. It was
tell me what the experience looked like. Now you're giving me the Monday morning quarterback kind of answer here. Okay, I want to know what the experience was like right then. Can you bring yourself back to that moment? I know you see the guy up front. I know you see all the people around you. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
I've never, it's interesting you asked that. I've never really thought about detailing what that was like. That's an interesting way to look at it. I think for me, I had a real conviction that I had never personally made any type of commitment to Christ, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Even though I'd heard about it all my life, I'd never really, it didn't really touch me in a personal way. I'd never really decided personally. That night, I felt like I needed to make a personal decision. Am I going to follow Christ or I'm not going to do this? And so I did that night. It was, when he gave the invitation, it was a typical little church. They had about 50 verses of a song, and And I made a commitment. I went forward. I made a personal decision. I told him, I said, I want to place my trust in Jesus Christ as a personal decision for me to follow him. And so I did that night. And
how do you do
I
that?
never looked back on it.
How did you do that?
Well, because it was the church, it was, we don't do this now in the ministry I do, but, in this church, they had a little invitation. They would sing some songs. And if somebody wanted to make a personal commitment, you would actually go forward and meet the guy. And he would ask you what's your decision? What are you doing?
Well, take your time. Bring me through this is what I want to know.
And he asked me, he said, why are you coming forward here? And I said, well,
he asked you.
Yeah.
You weren't with 100 people standing in front of him. He pointed at you.
Well, he came, they come and stand in the front of the church and, in the front of the podium after he finishes. And he says, if you want to come forward and make a personal commitment to Christ, you can do it right now. And I'll meet you here. So I did it. I went forward. It was a big step for me.
And so what did he do?
And he took my hand. He said, what's your decision here? And I said, I want to place my faith in Jesus Christ. He led me in a little simple prayer about placing just a simple prayer of asking Jesus Christ to be my personal Savior and Lord. I did that. And
what was the prayer? Do you remember the prayer that he took you through?
Well, I've led a lot of people in this prayer. But
you have, but prayer. I'm wondering, do you remember his prayer?
Well, not exactly, to be honest. But it was a prayer where it was a simple prayer of, I realize that I'm a sinner. I'm not perfect. I'd like to ask Jesus Christ to be my personal Lord and Savior, to forgive me of my sins and to give me eternal life. It was real simple, similar to that. And I prayed that with him. And, I didn't feel any great feeling, but I knew that I meant it. I was sincere. I understood what I was doing, even at 10, because I grew up in an environment where I'd always heard this. So I knew what he was talking about.
So you didn't get this, oh my gosh. Struck by
angels,
kind of
angels flew in the room. The lights didn't flicker, but I meant that. I was sincere in what I did.
It's interesting. I'll just say this: is I talk to a lot of people and have in high tech ministries, the ministry I'm involved in, have been, is that say, I ask, are you a Christian? And they give the answer, well, of course I am. I always went to church. I still go to church. They never got to where they, So I wonder, at some point we go from the faith that we have, and I read this from Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled. Okay. Is that what the name of the book was?
Yeah. The Road Less Traveled. Yeah.
Right.
Great book.
He made a comment in there that really stuck with me. It says, at some point, our faith needs to move from being our parents' faith to my faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which comes in that decision. You can't just keep soaking in it. Okay. And because your parents have faith, you therefore have faith. No, it has to be personal, as you're saying. Okay. God made you as an individual. He didn't make you as, a family. You're an individual as part of a family, which is, I always found is interesting because that happened to me. But so then because of this faith, and now we go back to that comment you made a long time ago, which is, I just knew there was something else for me. It wasn't for me. Right. So here you are communicating with God. What did that mean? Tell me about that experience.
Well, I think for me, and my experience was similar to what I saw a lot of people like me. I grew up in a church background. I made a commitment at a young age. After I made that commitment, even though I was sincere and I was very serious about what I did, I didn't have a clue how to grow in that relationship with Christ. I thought you go to church on Sunday, Monday through Saturday is your time as long as you're not too bad.
That's what they modeled, and that's what you continue to do. Okay.
I never saw much different than that. I never saw any kind of difference until I went to the university. Actually, when I went to university is where I began to grow as a Christian. That's when I began to understand, more about what it meant to be a Christian. And
where did you go to university?
Well, my first year, I actually was a good athlete, and I went to school. I went to a small university on a baseball scholarship my freshman year, Henderson State University, small college, small university in Arkansas. In Arkansas. Okay. And it's in Arkadelphia, Arkansas, near Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I played there, and Joe had a good year, but I thought, if I'm serious about going to medical school, I might need to go to a bigger school. So I transferred.
Where did medical school come from?
Well, I'd always been interested, and I can't tell you why. I'd always had a real appreciation for medicine. I always thought this is something I'd like to do. So I was like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do in that time, but I thought, I'd be interested maybe in going to medical school, becoming a doctor. And so I was a pre-med student. I transferred there at the University of Arkansas, chemistry pre-med. And that's where, when I went to Arkansas, is where God began to do something in my life.
Why didn't you apply to other schools other than Arkansas? Why did you decide to stay right there in the same state?
Well, Fayetteville, I don't know how much you know about Arkansas. Fayetteville is all the way across the state from Blytheville, which is Blytheville's northeast, Fayetteville's northwest. So it's a good trip. But I'd always liked the Razorbacks. It had always been, I'd been a Razorback fan growing up. And so it was a big school. It was the school in Arkansas. So I went there. And anyway, at the University of Arkansas is where God began to work in my life. I got involved in a good church there where the pastor was a great teaching pastor. And I also got involved in Campus Crusade, or Cru, a student group there on campus. Did you have anybody
mentoring you before you got to Arkansas?
Never had anybody mentor me spiritually. That was a big lack in my life. That would have really made a difference in me.
So you went to Arkansas and decided, I just need to plug into a church. You just knew it was the right thing to do?
Going to church was normal for me. I always went to church. Okay. So, that was a normal thing for me. But Cru was not. That was a new thing for me. And I had a friend that I met at Henderson State who knew of Campus Crusade. He said, if you go to Arkansas. Use that
term Cru, just so people know going forward. That was a rebranding that took place. How long ago?
A couple of years ago. Used to be Campus Crusade for Christ. A couple of years ago, they changed the name to Cru.
Right. So
CRU.
Campus Crusade for Christ is what, certainly most people that'll be listening to this probably know of. Cru being the new
it's more familiar
identifier. Okay. So how did you get involved with them?
Well, I had a friend at Henderson who was a football player, and I'd met him when I was there playing baseball. He said, if you go to Arkansas, he was from Fayetteville. He said, you ought to get involved in Campus Crusade. It's a good group. So I didn't know much about them, but they advertised on campus. I found the group, and I went there for a meeting. And God really used Cru in my life. It was huge for what I needed.
What was that first meeting like? So here you are, 19 years old?
About 19, yeah.
Yeah, right. You walk into this meeting, we're all so self-conscious, so I guess you're thinking, well, I'm a Christian. They're all Christians, like, oh, this should be good. I'm meeting new friends. What was that first meeting like?
Well, I'll tell you what I noticed is they had a meeting called College Life, and they would have them in sorority houses, nice sorority houses, and with attractive women there too. I noticed that. I definitely noticed that. And he told me that too. He said it's a good place to meet attractive ladies too. And so I was single and interested. And so I went to some of their meetings, but I noticed real quickly the meetings they had maybe first couple of meetings I went to probably had, 70, 100 people there, somewhere in that range. A lot of attractive ladies, a lot of, and it was there, the College Life meeting, they talked about basically what Jesus Christ could mean in your life. And it was somewhat evangelistic, but it was also focused towards believers too. And so I filled out a comment card, and somebody followed me up and said, hey, and I got involved in a small group Bible study.
Was it one of those attractive ladies that followed up?
No, this was a guy that followed me up.
Some ugly guy from Arkansas follows up with you, right?
That's right.
That's a bait and switch, man.
Well, that's true. But I kept going to meetings. I definitely kept going to meetings. And but the small group was great for me. It's the first time I had ever really started to read the Bible myself. I'd been in church all my life, but I'd never read the Bible myself, So I started having a quiet time. They said, you need to have, it's important for your spiritual life to have a quiet time with God every day. So I started doing that.
So was somebody at this point mentoring you at this point?
Yeah. The guy that led that study was a little bit older than me, and he was a good role model for me. He helped me grow. Art Hill was the first guy that I worked with.
You still in touch with Art these days?
I haven't kept up in a long time. I don't know.
Isn't that something? Okay. But
it was great for me.
He had an impact on your life.
He had an impact on my life. I began to read the Bible. I learned about the ministry of the Holy Spirit.
Where did you start reading the Bible? I mean, it's one thing, the Bible is this huge book, right? You say, oh, yeah, go read the Bible. Are you kidding me? That's like, say, go read the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? I mean, what did he tell you to do?
Well, we used some material. We used some structured material. It's called, one of them was the 10 Basic Steps to Christian Maturity. It was they give you a guideline. They kind of give you some things you can work.
So this came out of Campus Crusade. That's one of their publications.
One of them was on prayer. One of them was on the Bible. One of them was on the Holy Spirit.
Oh, okay.
And
so they were
have
topical.
Structured lessons. Yeah. And in those lessons, they have recommended Bible reading. They say, read the first 3 chapters of Romans. Read that goes with the lesson. So I began to read the Bible for the first time myself, and I began to realize I knew nothing about the Bible in terms of what it really said to me as a believer, what I'm supposed to do. And so it was dramatic for me as I began to read. I think
that's interesting because one of the things is you just say, just read the Bible. What happens when you read it using a topical study as your guide, tell me if I'm wrong on this, is you're reading it with purpose.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So I'm reading about prayer and it's bringing me these verses. So when I read this, I'm reading it specifically to find out what is it saying to me about prayer.
That's right. That's right.
And that really would bring it to, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Oh, okay.
The study had like a lesson. It had for example, prayer. There were 6 lessons on prayer. And each one had a practical application at the end of the lesson. Like, okay, you learn this, so what do you do with it?
Yeah.
So that was good. The practical, put it into your life type thing. And I began to do that, and it really began to affect my spiritual life. I began to grow a little bit as a believer. And so I also with Cru, they taught me, I'd never done this in my life. They said, Christians, they showed me, I learned verses says you ought to be involved in telling other people about Jesus. Well, I'd never done that. And, I thought evangelism.
What was your reaction to that?
Well, at first I thought, well, I don't know that I can do this kind of thing. I'm not a pastor. I'm not an evangelist. But what they did is I had an older leader who took me out, trained me in how to use the little 4 Spiritual Law booklet, little tract on evangelism. And then he would take me out with him.
What's a tract?
It's like a little brochure. It's like a little small book that has a little simple, it goes through 4 points on what you need to do to become a Christian. It's an evangelistic tract. And anyway, they trained me in how to use the booklet. And then my leader took me out with him to do it. I watched him do it. He said, watch me. He'd been doing this a while. We would go out and talk to people on campus. And
you mean just like walk up to somebody?
Well, we did surveys. We would go to dorm rooms, take short surveys to kind of see what students think. And one of the questions related to the spiritual life. Some were more open than others, but I was surprised. A lot of students were quite open to talk about spiritual things. And he would pull out
that was your first surprise.
First surprise, it was that people were actually interested. A lot of students were quite open.
What kind of question? You remember the kind of question that he would ask that would sort of open the door to a spiritual discussion? Because spirituality is sort of in today's marketplace. Say, are you a spiritual person? Oh, I'm a spiritual person. And especially talking to college kids to say, is God or the concept of God, is that sort of important to you? And I'm like, I go to fraternity houses. I don't think so. Right. So what was the question that sort of opened the door that surprised you to their answers?
Well, the last part of the survey was helpful. And we actually tabulated the surveys to try to get an idea how students think. And so
why would somebody take a survey from this thing called Campus Crusade?
Well, we would go to a dorm room and say, look, we're with Campus Crusade, a student organization. We're taking a short survey that we're taking all over campus. Want to see if you'd help us for a few minutes. And we had like 8 questions. It was a quick little survey. the last couple of questions were on the spiritual side of life. How important is the spiritual side of life to you? And would you be interested in knowing how you could have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? That was one of the questions. And if they said yes, we would say, look, we've got a little small booklet
either one
here.
of those questions.
Yeah, we would say we've got a short little booklet here. It takes about 10 minutes. I'd like to go through it with you, see what you think of it. It explains how you could have a relationship with God through Christ. And we found a lot of students quite open to that. And so I watched him do that for a couple of months, and he said, okay, next week, your turn.
What was the reactions that you would get from students who would say, okay, fine, show me a little booklet? What was the reactions that, as you kind of lay them out for me, were there like 3 typical reactions, or were they all over the board?
Well, this is Arkansas.
Because it's sort of awkward, I think. All of a sudden we're kind of sitting there and you're going through this little booklet. I'm sitting on my bed in my dorm room, and there's Terry, still amazed that I said I was interested in spiritual anything. So he's just aghast. And this guy's got his little booklet out, his tract, as you call it. And he started to say, well, sit here and let me show you this. Yeah. It seemed to me that would be a fairly awkward moment, right?
I tell you the first story, when I shared the booklet with somebody the first time, I was so nervous I couldn't hold it still. And I was trying to show him the booklet, and he finally said, look, why don't you lay it down on the desk so I can follow along with you better? It was humiliating.
Why were you so nervous?
I did. I laid it down.
Why were you so nervous?
For some reason, I just had never done it. And I knew I could, but I think when I did it personally, it was a little more, I just was a little nervous. I don't know. It was funny.
You were afraid you were going to fail, or you were afraid you were going to, this guy was going to say, what is this? Who are you really, man?
I think it was just the fact that I was actually doing this, and I was actually talking with somebody here, and but I got better at that. I got a little bit less.
No, but
nervous.
It is interesting. But I asked you that question about the different reactions from people when you take them through this little track. What were the reactions that you would get? How would you categorize them?
I would say a lot of students at the University of Arkansas were quite familiar with spiritual things. A lot of them came from church backgrounds. It was nothing new for them, most of them. So it was a pretty warm environment to talk with somebody there. Some people made some decisions for Christ. Some people were interested, were believers, and we said, look, we've got some Bible studies that you might be interested in. We could invite them to meetings. Some of them got involved in studies. Some of them said, look, I agree with most of what you're saying, but I'm not interested in doing anything with this. So it depended. But overall, the response was quite accepting. At Arkansas at that time, it was pretty easy to do that.
Even in spite of that warm environment, that you speak about, you were still very, very nervous the first time that you did it.
I definitely was.
I think it's great. It is true that it's one thing for us to watch other people do something. It's like if you think about somebody says, well, I'm going to bring you along as a salesperson, right? So you watch me and I go, and I've done this. I remember I was selling encyclopedias door to door, and I followed this guy, and he was this tall, well-built, good-looking black guy. He was my boss, and he's taking me door to door, and I think we went to 3 places, and he sold 2 sets of encyclopedias. And I'm like, this guy makes it so easy. And then the next day we get there and he says, kicks me out of the car and he says, you do it. Oh man, I thought I was going to die. First person opened the door. I don't think I was able to talk. It's like,
didn't know your name, did you?
Right. Just deer in the headlights is what it was. And I just kept doing it, though. It was something that was really interesting. So then what happened? How did you progress?
It's funny. What he did with me is what I do today. I still do the same thing. I train business people who are believers in how to communicate their faith, just like he trained me. I teach them how to use in the Czech Republic. I teach them how to use the booklet. We train them. I let them watch me do it, and then we let them do it.
Isn't it funny?
It's the same principle.
So when
it never
when you're
changes.
training somebody, do you get these flashbacks of this guy training you?
I remember it very distinctly. Yeah,
Isn't
it was
that
great for me.
What made him so effective?
Well, he was very. It's like this guy you talked about with encyclopedias. He was quite competent. He knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
He was very sure of it. I mean, I hate to say sure of himself, but he knew what he was doing. He was very comfortable with it. And so that for me, it was like, I can do that. I watch him say, I can do that. It gives you and then you start doing it, you realize it's a little bit more challenging. But, those principles are eternal principles. They work. They work in anything. To train somebody.
You said something that's very important. I think that when we're actually showing somebody what we do and then sort of showing them the principles behind what we do, is that we have the person who you're bringing along has to get to the point where they actually say inside their heart, I can do that.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
I mean, that's when you know that you've kind of moved it from you to them, if you will.
That's right. That's right.
Because now it's personal, because if I do it and it's not successful the first time, I go like, wait a minute, I know I can do this. Yeah. Right? Versus having someone else say you can do it and you never believe in you could.
That was me to a T. That was exactly what happened with me.
I love that.
And it's interesting, that experience changed my direction in life. I began to realize that God could use me in something like this. And it was eye-opening for me. I began to really internalize, what I was doing, to the point where this is something I thought, I want to invest my life in this. I feel like this is something.
What happened to being a doctor?
Well, that's a great question. I still have a great respect for the profession, but by the time I was ready to graduate, I knew that I wanted to invest my full time in doing ministry with people, doing evangelism and discipleship.
When did that happen?
Started about my junior year.
You said, no, it's not this. We already did it once. It's not farming, it's medicine. Okay? So now you're saying, in fact, it's not farming, it's baseball. And then
I knew I wasn't going to play professional.
Oh, you weren't?
baseball.
Okay. And then it's not baseball, it's medicine. And now you've gotten to, what year in college are you when you say it's not medicine?
My junior year. My junior year at the University of Arkansas, I began to shift. I went to a conference.
And you remember, can you bring me back to that and what happened? Yeah.
Yeah. I went to a conference at Daytona Beach. I had never been across the Mississippi River. I'm an Arkansas boy there. So I went to see the ocean for the first time. I was wowed by it.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you, but my first partner was in Mobile, Alabama, and he flew me to Mobile, Alabama from Miami. And he said, I want to work with you. And he said, why are you so uncomfortable? I said, tell you the truth, I've never been west of I-95,
Didn't know there was
experience, I've never been east of the Mississippi. I love that.
Well, I was wowed by the ocean. That was a little bigger than I'd ever seen. And so we spent the week.
Bigger than some of those lakes in Arkansas?
Bigger than some of those lakes. It made those lakes look small. But, we spent the week at Daytona Beach. It's a spring break, so it's crazy. Students are there to party and have fun all over the place. But we would go there with crew, and we had about 500 students that would go there. We would have a speaker at night, and then during the day, we would pair up and go out on the beach and talk to students. There was tons of students out there. And so that
was
week,
the same as going to the dorm rooms.
Similar to the dorm room. We took a little short survey and see if they wanted to talk more. And if they did, we would, share the gospel with them. But that week, I saw 7 students make this, at least indicate decisions for Christ when I approached them and talked to them. It was again a big event for me, because
what does that mean? Using terminology that's not indicated decisions for Christ. I mean, what is
it? Well, it means in this case we share the little booklet, and there's an opportunity in the booklet for a person to actually make a personal commitment to Christ. They can
like
do that.
You did when you were 10,
just like I did when I was 10.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I had 7 people, and of course I say indicated because I wasn't able to follow them up. They were from all over the U.S. But, it was, I think for me, it was like, God can use me. This is something I can I can be used by God. And there was a speaker at the conference. His name was Glenn Plate. I remember that. And he was the national director for the campus ministry of Cru. And I'd known him for a long time, but he gave a talk, and he said something that really gripped me. He said, if you have the opportunity when you're like 70, 80 years old to look back on your life, what would you like to say you've accomplished for Jesus Christ as a believer? And how do you want to invest your life to accomplish the most for him? For me personally, that question touched me. I still remember to this day. I thought, I want, in my case, this is my story. In my situation, I really wanted to invest my time and my talents in being directly involved in evangelism and discipleship. And so that was the turning point for me to begin to move in a different direction. And so by the time I was ready to graduate, I was convinced I wanted to be involved initially in a ministry of evangelism and discipleship with university students. Cru offered a great opportunity to do that. So I applied for their staff and went through the training they offered, and they assigned me to the University of South Carolina in 1975. I'd never set foot in the state of South Carolina.
Let me ask you a question. This whole idea of, what was the question that guy, the question he asked you?
It was, how do you want to invest your life as a believer to make the greatest impact for Jesus Christ? Okay. And that was a great question for me. I was at a point where I was trying.
That question has an assumption to it, okay? That we do want to have an impact for Jesus Christ. When did you come in the world? When did you come to that realization that you wanted to have an impact? Because you look at when you came to Christ at 10, mm-hmm. That was all about, just making a personal commitment to him.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It wasn't mm-hmm. like, I made a personal commitment to you. What do you want me to do? I want you to be pleased. I want this impact. I mean, all of that didn't come out of that. When did it come to the point when you realized, you said, I really want to make an impact for Christ?
In doing ministry as a student at the University of Arkansas, and I think that conference, as strangely as that sounds, that conference had an impact on my life because I saw results in ministry, and it really was something I felt like God could use me to do. And that my talents.
You wanted to be, but I guess I'm asking the question: when did you decide it was important to be used by God to? When I was His glory,
my junior year, my junior year in college is where I began to really grapple with that. And
most people, you have his personal relationship with Christ, right? And then I'm a doctor, right? I mean, those are the two things. I'm not a doctor, trying to, introduce other people to Christ, okay? I do that, maybe in my home when I'm not a doctor. You follow me? With my family. So I keep both of those things separately. You seem to have crossed a boundary here. You said, this is the work that I want to do.
This is what I wanted to put my full time in. And, and I tell business people this all the time. I said, as a business person, you're a Christian businessman. People that we work with, you're a Christian first, you're a businessman second. You can be a successful businessman, but you can also be a missionary for Jesus Christ with business people, with your colleagues. You can be a testimony. You can have an impact. And that's true. In my case, I felt like this is something I want to invest my full time and abilities in doing in a full-time way. And so I don't say that to everybody.
That's a big decision. I remember, you talk about that. I've had that lecture about, as a Christian businessman, you really you can lead people to Christ and all that. And I remember I read Billy Graham's biography. And I said, I went to a Bible study and I said, I read this biography. I said, it's just not fair. You're asking me as a business person to bring up spiritual matters, to other business people. I said, when Billy Graham walked into the president of the United States office, the president wasn't shocked when Billy Graham said, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ?
That's
The
probably
president's
true.
sitting there going, of course he's asking me that question, right?
This is Billy
Now,
Graham.
if the guy that's running the biggest real estate trust in the United States walks into his office and asks that question, it's like, wait a minute. Where did this come from? Right?
Yeah.
So it's very different,
true.
you know. That's why I got angry about him. Like he had like a free ticket to talk about this. Okay, I don't have that ticket, but we'll talk about that a little bit later because I know that you really got involved with business people. So when you went back, now you went to the university. So you get a degree. What's your degree in from Arkansas?
Chemistry.
Perfect. Okay.
I use it a lot.
You didn't take the MCATs to get into med school.
No, I didn't.
So you go for training to Campus Crusade. And how does that work? You know, what's the do they write you a big check every month to kind of make it all work, or how does it work?
No, they don't. It's a good idea, but a lot of people would like that idea. They have what they call it's about 4 weeks of Institute of Biblical Studies and 3 weeks of staff training for any new staff. And the staff training is just basically focusing on, you know, Campus Crusade, what it is, what we do. And then also they train you. All of our staff raise their own financial support, all of them, including Bill Bright. When he started, he did his also. And, you know, they teach you how to do that, how to raise support for your work. And so that's the first thing I did is I had to develop a support team that would enable me to spend my full time in doing ministry, which I did.
Yeah, but
and
it was actually
like
somebody who becomes a life insurance salesman right out of college. And who does he go to first?
You know, it was really good training for me. Great for your communication skills. Great for it was great. I still have people today that have supported us for over 40 years. I mean, over 30
unbelievable.
Years. And they become your friends.
Are they family and friends? Or were they family and friends way back then?
Well, we've had people now that we're almost like their kids. You know, that we were part of their family. You know, it's been a real fun thing, and that's been a fun thing to do. But
so how much money did you? What year was this?
This was 1975.
So so you and I graduated the same year. So in 1975, you had to go out and raise this. But how much money did you have to raise?
$600 a month.
Right. And when you raised that $600 a month, you know, was it mostly from your parents?
No, my parents were not excited about this idea.
That was my next question. I was wondering about that. I sent you away to become a doctor. You come back, what, this Campus Crusade something or other?
Yeah, they didn't understand at all. Yeah, that was tough for them. It was tough for them. They didn't like the idea of raising support either.
Because that was kind of embarrassing to them, wasn't it?
Maybe, but I didn't raise support in our home area. I raised it in Fayette where I went to school.
Oh,
and that was actually helpful for me. It was better for them.
You're
better
raising
for me.
$600 a month from kids your age.
No, we had, you know, they teach you, you'd know this, they teach you how to network, how to get referrals, and you meet different people. And, you know, I met some wonderful Christian people that were business people that were interested in what I was doing. And several of them invested in our
You're bringing up something very important for entrepreneurs. Okay. So I come out of college, you know, my network potentially could only be college students. So, you know, basically we're all broke, right? We're all trying to start careers. We're all trying to get our living. We're all trying to get out of this crappy old car that we have to, you know, we all want that new car, right? So we have these. Yeah. How did you go about that early networking to get to people of means, if you will, who were able to support you?
Yeah, Crew does a good job in training people how to raise support. That was something I really got some good training on. And
they teach you how. Tips here.
Well, they teach you how to ask for referrals. That's one of the key things. When you meet somebody, say, look, do you know somebody else that might be interested in hearing about my work? Would you mind if I used you as a referral? Did you have maybe a few names? And some people were quite generous to give you 10, 15 names of people they knew. And I could say, Charlie Paparelli recommended that I call you. I'm with Campus Crusade. You know, I'm preparing to go to work with Campus Crusade full time. We develop our own support. I wonder if I could come by and tell you what I'm doing to see if you might be interested in being part of our support team. And, you know, it was a simple little phone conversation. And I met some wonderful people that, you know, were very interested in what I was doing.
So what was so you show up, what's your pitch?
Well, we have a little, actually this is where Crew helped us. They had a little like book we put together that summarizes what you do, what Campus Crusade is, what you're going to do with Campus Crusade in your work. And you can take them through a little flip chart, just kind of giving them your information on what.
I get it. Well, what was your pitch? Why did people back then, talking to little Terry Brown, 22 years old, what did Terry
You know,
do?
I would say, you know, my desire is to go to I was assigned to the University of South Carolina, and South Carolina is to go there and to be able to share the gospel with students here, to help them grow in their faith, and to make an impact there for Jesus Christ on the college campus at the University of South Carolina. And that was kind of my heart of, this is why I'm going. This is what I'm doing.
And what was your close? What was the close?
Well, I would say, we would always close it. Would you be interested in being part of our support team? And I would say, and if they said yes, and I'd say, we know you could invest so much per month, whatever you want to do. And I would explain how they could do that. And, you know, I became quite comfortable doing that. I learned how to do it and was quite comfortable doing it. And I met it was more encouraging for me than them. I met some wonderful people that just were quite encouraged. Some people didn't support us.
More no's or more yeses?
Well, usually the no's came on the phone. You know, people say, well, you know, I'm already investing in this, or I've got, you know. But when I met people personally, they encouraged me, even if they didn't support me. They said, yeah, I like what you're doing. You know, I might want to pray for you. You know, it was fun. It was good experience for me.
So even the no's, the yeses, and there's the no-nos, which are the phone calls, but the no's in person and the yeses in person, always turned into continuing network for you.
Yeah, I get referrals. Even if they don't support me, I often got referrals. But you don't
lose them either.
No.
If I say to you, no, I'm not going to do but I'll pray for you. You know, I love the work that you're doing, but I'm not predisposed at this point to kind of give you money, or I don't know you well enough to give you money, whatever it might be. Did you ask the question, well, can I keep in touch with you?
Absolutely. Say, look, we send out a newsletter once a month telling what we're doing. Could I put you on our newsletter list? And I did. That was a great way to keep up with people. A lot of times later on, people like that would say, look, I'd be interested in supporting your work down the road.
I love that. So then you're in South Carolina, armed with your $600 a month, living in a what?
Well, we were in an apartment.
Were you living in your car there? I mean, what did you do? What did you do?
Well,
you don't know anybody.
We raised a little more than that. That was the salary level.
Who's we? You were married?
No. I'm saying staff. I could raise a little bit more for reimbursable expenses that were ministry related. So it was a little bit more than $600 a month, but not too much more. But I had a roommate on staff. We roomed together, in an apartment, and we were a couple of guys, and we would, we did our ministry there. I worked with a team. I was part of a team there that we did evangelism.
So you joined something that already had leaders and was.
I had a director. I had a campus. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
I wasn't by myself. I joined a team of about 6 staff. Had a campus director who'd been there for several years. That was valuable for me. He was there to train me and to help me get started. It was great.
What did you look back on that time? What did you learn? What lessons came out of that?
About the support raising, or
no, just you go to University of South Carolina, and you join this team of 6, and you said there was a leader who was an established leader for that ministry, for Campus Crusade for Christ there, and you said I learned so much. So what things, as you look back, say, was these 5 things or whatever? It might be just one thing that said, boy, that really stuck with me and brought me to this next level in my career, if you will.
You know, the first year was a simple year. It's the simplest year I ever had with Campus Crusade. Because all I did, my director said, look, I want you to go out and meet people, talk to people about Jesus Christ, and if people are interested, if people make decisions, follow up, get them involved in a group. It was simple. I didn't have to manage anything. I just went out and met with people. It was an easy, fun year for me. Saw a lot of fruit. Saw a lot of people make decisions for Christ. Started a couple of small group studies that I was leading. It was great for me.
Let me ask you another question
really
then. This is interesting. So here you are on your own now, okay, doing it yourself as your occupation, speaking about Jesus to people that you don't know. That is what I would call being a true evangelist, right? You know, this isn't relationship evangelism or anything. This is just true evangelism. I don't know you, you don't know me, and then there's this divide I have to cross that you got to allow me to cross to do this. If you look at people back then that you said made decisions to give their lives to Christ, what back then, as you can remember, as best you can, had them make that decision? Like I asked you, why did you get up and go to the front of the church? So what would be the answer that you would look and say, here's why these people did that? And then there were certain people that didn't. Okay, so why did they? Yeah. You look at what motivated them to do that at that time.
I will say this, Charlie. That's a good question. It's a very good question. I would say two things. Some of the people that we met were just cold turkey surveys, whatever. And some were filtered contacts. What I mean by that is we had like a meeting on campus for students. Somebody would come, they'd fill out a card saying, hey, I'm interested. And so I could call a person that's already saying I'm interested and meet with them. Those were the best contacts, always. That shaped my ministry philosophy.
What was going on in their life that made them interested?
Well, I would say it could be a variety of things, but we would sponsor, like I mentioned College Life when we did College Life at the University of South Carolina. It was a meeting open to anybody. We'd have a speaker that spoke on a relevant topic, and we would invite students to come. And, a lot of these students were new. We never met them before. And, we always at a College Life had people fill out comment cards at the end just to let us know who they were, get them information. And we also had a place, I'm interested in the theme of what the speaker spoke on. I'd like to talk more about it. Those people we call personally and see if we can set up appointments with them because they're warm contacts. and those were helpful too. They were filtered contacts and they came out of meetings. So that helped us too to penetrate a little bit like on a large campus.
When I asked you a very personal question about the student, you brought me back to process. Okay. Mm-hmm. I want an answer about the student. You're talking to me on campus. I'm a sophomore at University of South Carolina. You're this old guy at 22, right? Who's telling me about this, and I make a decision. Why did I make that decision? Because you were just so convincing, or because what was it in my life that just opened me up that I had this need, in fact, to be for a savior? Okay, Jesus is the savior of the world. Why did they have this need? I'm 18 years old. I have a need for some savior. Like what, when you look back at those people, what was it that made them make that decision?
I think that's a tough question to answer. Because I believe,
and I'm not going to let you go either. Okay. So you need to answer this question. People want to know.
I'll try. I would say,
this is like me talking to an entrepreneur and saying, they didn't buy your product because they liked you. Maybe they did. That's one reason to buy a product. I like the sales guy, if you will, right? But there also had to be, dig deeper, they must have had some need for having to buy that product, right?
No, that's a good question.
I think, what was the hole? What was the missing piece for them that they just said, this is a good time for me?
I think my opinion, Charlie, is they were similar to me when I was 10 years old. A lot of them had been in a church background and they'd been around this environment all their lives. But when I would have opportunities to talk with them, it's like, well, personally, where are you?
Yeah.
How does this relate to you? And a lot of these students are just like me. They thought, well, I've been in church most of my life, but I never really I never thought about how this affects me personally. And I think a lot of people made decisions. This is the University of South Carolina, and everybody, you didn't meet an atheist there. I mean, everybody has some kind of connect with a church or spiritual things. And so it was an easy connect, but I really focused on my own story when I talked to students, and I focused how I became a believer, that it was a personal thing for me. I needed to make that commitment. And the little booklet that I used, the 4 Spiritual Laws, was really good about bringing it. This is a decision you need to make personally if you haven't made it.
Yeah,
and I think that was probably
about why you need to make this decision, and then here is the decision, right?
Yeah, and I think that was. I would honestly say most of the students that I.
So what I'm hearing is that people just like you, you're talking to people that just like you, your story resonated with them. And that is, they had to go from, I'll go again back to that Scott Peck thing. It had to go from how I was raised and the faith that I knew then to make it my faith.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And so and that's your story. That is your story.
And I think I understood my audience well, because that was me. That was me.
And they're all Southern boys too, right?
They're all Southern boys, most of them. And so, they connected. What I do now is totally different. I'll tell you
how long did you do? How long did you do that?
I was at the University of South Carolina for 11 years. I went there just to be there for 2 years. But at the end of my first year, my director took a different position. You may not remember this, but the Here's Life strategy, Bruce Cook was key in developing that for Campus Crusade.
Yeah, I never really quite understood what Bruce did at Campus Crusade, but he was key in developing this new program.
Bruce was very key. He did some tremendous things. He worked closely with Dr. Bright, very closely with Dr. Bright. But
was Dr. Bright the founder of Campus Crusade?
1951. He was a founder, former businessman, successful businessman who left his business and started Campus Crusade, 1951. And he started on the story.
I mean, why would a businessman decide to give to reach college students? I mean, that's that actually sounds like a disconnect to me.
It's interesting. If you ever, he wrote a book called "Come Help Change the World." I think that Dr. Bright had a real vision for Campus Crusade being a tool that God could use to reach a much broader audience. But he targeted university students because university students are so strategic. Just like I think business and professional people are entrepreneurs are very strategic. Yeah. And university students were just like me when I was at the University of Arkansas. I'm trying to figure out what to do with my life. What am I going to do? And so, Cru, you reach somebody for Christ and you work with them and train them and develop them. A lot of people say, I want to invest in this. I want to be involved.
That was your story.
My story. Yeah.
So you're the poster boy for Campus Crusade.
I would be a classic Crusade story in some ways. Yeah.
Okay.
And but I was at USC for 11 years. I became the campus director my second year, which was really not good. I was just not ready to do that. I had to supervise staff.
You replaced that guy that was there for that many years.
He left his position, and I was, I don't know. Anyway, I became the campus director. It was way too quick for me to develop staff and to work with the team. So
you were 24?
I was probably 23 when I got that position, but it was way before I was ready to do it. I learned on the job how to work with staff, how to work with a team, how to develop
and how to work with corporate.
Yeah, it was just a whole different
ballgame. You reported if you worked as the campus director, who did you report into then?
I had an area director that I reported to.
And he would have multiple universities?
He would have multiple. North and South Carolina was an area. So the area director oversaw the works in North and South Carolina.
And then that person, who did he report to?
He had a regional director that was in Atlanta that had the region, the Southeast region. And so he reported to him.
And then regional managers reported to?
National director. National director.
I got it. Okay. I just want to know where you were in that sort of pecking order Okay.
Yeah,
But now you're
I was
in the pecking order. Now you're actually
yeah,
managing something, right? I got it.
yeah, and I was way over my head. I didn't know how to manage a team at all, but I began to learn a little bit. But it took me several years to begin to get a grip on how to work with a team, how to help them work as a team together.
Did this area director, did he mentor you in this, or did he just cut you loose and said good luck to you?
The only thing I would, no, he didn't. I got some training, but it would have been really good for me to have 4 or 5 years under a good director to learn the ropes a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that. I think it was too quick. But anyway, I survived.
It is funny how much that we do learn as the doers, if you will, the subordinates, how much we learn from watching.
That's right.
Right.
That's
and
right.
How people treat us and what worked and what didn't work. It's almost how we become parents, right?
It is.
The only experience we have of parents is our parents.
That's right.
You know, you hear some people say, man, I just want to be like my dad. And all. Then you have other people say, like, I want to do everything he didn't do. Right. You know, I want to, there's all this correction, but at least there was a model, some standard that you go to and say, I learned something, and that's true in business for sure. That's why I think it's so important that we be present and accounted for, in when we're doing business. So I watch my sales manager on how he manages. I watch him close sales that I warmed up, and that's how you do a close. And then how does he manage me? What does he cover in meetings? You didn't have any of that. I mean, you had like a year of it, and then he was gone. And it's 10 you're it. That's hard. That's really hard.
I learned a lot, but I think for me, what you said is so true. That's the way I train people today. Just exactly. I train them very in ministry, like how to share the gospel, how to do follow up. I train them very exactly, just like, what I've learned over the years. And I think those principles are so key in transferring from one place to the next.
And they are. And one of the things when we look at it with Jesus, for example, at some point in time, he's got all these people following him, all these what I'll call disciples. I'm not talking just the apostles, but disciples. And he calls them together at one point. He goes, all right, you watched me. I'm going to send you out now as sheep among wolves, in effect, okay, which is the Campus Crusade model. But one thing he did that I don't hear you saying is he sent them out 2 by 2. Now, they weren't alone. And now what happened? This guy left, and you were, in fact, alone. That's
as a director, yes, as a director in that really environment. Tough. Yeah, it was. It was a learning experience. I think it was too quick. I think Crew was a little bit quick on that.
So when did you finally get your what are some of the lessons that you, let me ask this, what are some of the lessons you learned when you felt, man, I wasn't ready for this? So what were the big things that you learned? The first lesson is you admitting I'm not ready for this. That's a first lesson.
No, it was.
Right?
Absolutely.
Versus I'm going to make believe and everybody's going to think I'm ready for this, okay? Which makes for a really bad leader, okay? So you walked in and said, I'm not ready for this. So that's a good learning. What else did you learn?
I think I learned, I think in looking back on that time, I wish that I think I wanted to have the team think I knew more than I knew, which sometimes is not the best way to be a leader. You're exactly right. And, so I think I went through a couple of years there of really coming to grips with the fact that I really was over my head, and I needed to admit that and try to learn how to become more effective. So I think one of the things I learned there is is the importance of learning, going to people that are competent at doing this and learning from them. If I had that time to do over, I would have traveled more to work to go watch an experienced campus director for a week or 2. Watch how he works with his team, get his ideas, and because that's how you learn. That's how you grow, like you said. And I don't think I did enough. That you
didn't have the mentor, cut and ran, right? So you didn't have a mentor. So what you're saying is I should have gone around and Even
should
if
have
they
taken
wouldn't
more
be
initiative.
my mentor, at least I could experience some of watching them work.
Absolutely. That was where I was
That makes
weak.
total sense. Yeah.
I would do that differently if I did it again. I would spend a lot more time learning from people who knew what they were doing. And I could have. Cru gave me the opportunity to do that. I just didn't do it. I was busy and I didn't invest in that. I should have. And I think I learned the hard way things that I could have learned better and easier and been more effective if I'd have taken more time
It took you
to
more
learn
time.
from people.
It took you more time to be effective than it
That's
should
exactly
have.
right. You make mistakes. You learn from mistakes.
When did you finally get, being in that job for so long, when did you finally say, you know what? I think I'm okay at this now.
That's a good question, too. I would say after about 5 years, I began to get a little bit of an idea of how to work with a team better, how to develop a team, how to grow as a team, and how to work in a ministry team structure. And so I'd say after about 5 years, I began to get a grip on the job.
How long should it have taken if you did these other things that you're talking about?
I think about 3 years, I would have been ready to lead a team and to do a much better job if I'd have had good
So it took
modeling
you 2 more
instruction.
years, 2 years of learning, hard learning. Right. And these poor guys reporting to you are all suffering through it with you.
The team suffered. That's exactly right.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
That was my fault a lot too, though. I could have taken more initiative. That was a lesson learned.
What something is interesting to me, though. I don't know who that but the area manager was. But it seems like he had some weaknesses too, and that he wasn't effective as an area manager because he should have seen these things, and he should have encouraged you to do the things that you're just now talking about. So sometimes you don't have the best bosses, and you're like me. I'll take it on myself. It's all my fault. But the fact that there is, you're in an organization and they should be looking out for you and help develop you. Okay. And if you don't develop, then you just become sort of a lifelong sort of on the ground Campus Crusade guy. And if you do develop, you move up.
Yeah, that's right. But I think,
go ahead.
I will say this. I think Cru has good training. They have campus director training too. So there was no training. There was. But I think for me,
I'm not talking about training. I'm talking about mentoring.
I'm
talking about good leadership that brings people
along. Mentoring is different. I agree. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I didn't have that. That would have been helpful for me.
That would have been really good for you. Yeah. So that's a big miss. So what about so as you moved up, what then happened next?
Well, in 1986, I took a position that was a great position for me. I became part of the area team. North and South Carolina. I had the responsibility of starting new ministries with Campus Crusade in South Carolina, in different universities in South Carolina, which was wonderful. It's very entrepreneurial, which I liked. I liked the freedom of it. I had a small team. I was able to be a little bit less, and I knew more how to work with a team. But, I basically started new ministries on campuses in South Carolina.
Give me an example of a new ministry that you started.
Charleston. I was in Columbia. We opened up 3 works in Charleston. What was Baptist College then is Charleston Southern today. College of Charleston and the Citadel. We opened up 3 Crusade works. They're student-led works that were with Cru. And we also opened up
works.
They're student ministries that are led by students. We supervise the students, but they have like a student leader that they didn't have full-time staff there. But we would start a student-led ministry.
This you would consider a new ministry idea. For the first time, we didn't have professional Campus Crusade, but we had students doing it for students.
They were supervised by staff like me.
I see.
But it was led by students. And we opened up 3 works in Charleston. We opened up a work at South Carolina State. We opened up Myrtle Beach.
Well, help me with something. If you didn't have any Crusade there to start with, who did you know? This is like, who did you know to go to actually pitch the idea to see if somebody...
That's a great question. We would go, we had 2 things I used. We would go to a campus, and the first thing I would do is look for any type of Christian activity on the campus, just looking on the bulletin boards. Is there a Bible study meeting here? Is there something like this? Is there a church that has students that go to it? And I would meet people that, like a pastor, and say, look, we would like to open up a new work here. Would there be some students that might be interested in maybe learning what we want to do? And through that networking, I always found people. It was not hard. And we do a lot of,
but that's just good. What that is that's market analysis. That's good prospecting. Saying, I'm trying to reach this person. Where does that person hang out? That's right. What you're doing, right? And if they hang out there, I'm going to go there and see if I can meet them. Okay. And this is just good prospecting. The same thing in business. You say, I'm trying to reach this person. Where do they hang out? Who influences them? Who can I talk to kind of get to them, right? Because you don't even know who to call. What am I going to do? Call everybody at the Citadel? Right?
I love it.
Does it make sense?
That for me, that was just a tremendous. I love the entrepreneurial part. It was just fun to go there and see what's going to happen. Because I didn't know. I had no idea. And what we did? We had great conferences. Cru has great conferences. We have a Christmas conference in Atlanta for many years. We had an Atlanta Christmas conference. And what we would do is
Christmas conference.
Christmas conference. We'd have speakers. It'd start about December 27th, go to January 1. We'd have about 1,000 students from the Southeast that would come there at a hotel, have a speaker couple of speakers that would speak. We'd have training. We'd go out one afternoon witnessing in Atlanta door to door.
These are conferences for Campus Crusade staff.
Students. These are students with Campus Crusade in the Southeast for Atlanta.
Oh, students, we'd have at least not staff members, but people who
staff too, staff and students, both
staff
would be
and
there.
Students. Okay.
And what we would do is when I would go to an expansion campus, I found some students that were more interested, I'd say, look, we got a great conference coming up. You ought to come to this just to see what we do. And they go there. There's 1,000 students there from the Southeast, and it's a wow type thing. They get a big vision real quick. And so they would come back from these conferences like, man, I want to be involved in this. What do we do? And then it gives me
that's that feeling like the feeling you get is this is a real movement.
It's a movement,
Lord, right?
Yeah.
This isn't just me all alone on some campus in some dorm room with some guy that's telling me he's not interested. It's a movement I'm a part of.
We have people that come back from this and they say, man, we'd like to have something like this on our campus. So it opens the door for me to say, okay, we'll help you. We will work with you on this. And so we saw some great things happen doing it. It was really fun for me. I love doing it.
Yeah,
we had it one
business. We call those, they would be customer conferences.
That's right.
So all the customers come in and they go like, wow, I'm part of something much bigger just by having this product kind of a thing,
A vision's caught, not taught. And they get a vision.
I like that. A vision is caught, not taught. Right.
And they come back ready to, man, I want to do something. What do I do? So it was great.
So where did you move from in your career then?
I stayed in that job and I really loved that job. That was a great fit for my entrepreneurial side. And, but in 1987, my wife and I met my wife in South Carolina. We were married in 81. And in 1987, I just left. She was a graduate student. She was working on a second degree. And and so I met her. She was working on a nursing degree, 2-year nursing degree. And I met her and we dated and got married in 1981. We had 2 small kids in 1987. And we had never been out of the country.
Concerns that she was sort of falling in love with a guy that doesn't have like a real income?
Well, I was able to support her. I will say that. I was able to support her. And
what did her father say when you asked him for her hand in marriage?
He's a businessman. He was a businessman in Florida.
So what did he say?
He was a little concerned that I could support her, but he okayed it. He was okay with it, but he wasn't super excited about it, I don't think. But anyway, we had 2 small kids and we had never been out of the U.S.
The way you pushed it, the way you blew by that, there must be a whole lot more to that story, but I'm not going to go there. Okay.
All right. We got along fine. He was not a real committed Christian. I think he was, I'd call him a minimally committed believer, but he didn't understand the spiritual aspect of what we were doing so well. But anyway, we had never been out of the U.S. And my wife and I both said, we need to get some international experience. So, Cru has ministries in 200 countries. It's international opportunities are everywhere. So we wrote Cru and called Cru and said, look, have you got a short-term assignment we could go on? We have 2 small kids. Where could you send us for the summer? And they gave us 2 options. I can't remember the first one, but the second was a resource team in Eastern Europe. At that time, it was communist, and they would send in student staff teams in the summers into these countries to meet with university students, to do evangelism and discipleship with university students in these countries. And you had to go in as a tourist. You couldn't go in as a missionary. You go in as a tourist. And so Lisa and I both were intrigued by that. So we said, okay, can we go with a resource team? So they assigned us to a resource team, which went to Hungary in 1987. Hungary was communist, and we went to Lake Balaton, which is the largest lake in Central Europe. It's like their ocean almost. And we were there with a team of about 15 students and staff. And we basically, this large lake, students from all over the East Bloc would come there that was their vacation. They'd lay on the beach area there. So we would go there. We would pair up, and we would take no materials. We didn't want to look like an organized team. So no Bibles, no materials, no nothing. And we would walk up to students and say, do you speak English? And if they spoke well enough to talk, we'd say, hey.
Would it be 2 of you going together?
I'm sorry?
You were 2 by 2?
Go 2 by 2. We'd pair up two to two. Right. And we'd say, hey, we're here from the U.S. for several weeks. We'd love to meet some people from Eastern Europe, find out about your country, university. And so it was easy to get conversations. A lot of people spoke English, a lot of students did. And so we strike up conversations, and we would eventually ask them about their spiritual life. And what was different for me is that summer, I didn't meet anybody that had ever been in a church or ever read a Bible. I mean, nobody did. This was totally opposite of South Carolina.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
And it was an eye-opener.
So when you brought up God, you did have 4 eyes in their mind, right?
I did. It was weird enough for an American to be walking around here meeting people, but then to bring up things about spiritual things was even weirder. But it was really a good experience.
So what was that conversation like?
Well, we had some really good conversations. We didn't see much fruit, but we had some they were open to talk. It was not hard to talk.
What do you talk to somebody that has no spiritual background at all, doesn't really think about it? They're just purely secular. What's the conversation like?
After a while, we would ask them, hey, say, look, we've in our country, where I'm from, South Carolina, many people there believe in God. What about your country? And they'd tell me about, well, a lot of people are atheists. And I said, what about you personally? And they'd say, yeah, I'm an atheist, or they never had any spiritual background. And I'd say, I believe there is a God. Would you be interested? I'd be interested to know why you don't believe there's a God. And I'd love to tell you why I think there is one, give my perspective on that. And they were really open to listen. I mean,
that's a great conversation.
And we used no materials. I mean, everything was done from you winged it. We didn't want to look like we were an organized team. And it was really good for me.
But at that time, you're a 30-year-old, or maybe 33?
About 30. I would have been about, let's see, I'd have been around 32, 33, somewhere in there.
32, 33, talking to 19 to 21-year-olds.
A lot of university students, they're a little older.
Oh,
in the area there. Yeah, so a little bit older, but it was great for me.
So
my wife and I left.
Back, you and your wife. What's your wife's name?
Lisa.
You and Lisa come back with the 2 kids right after doing that for 90 days?
Yeah, we were there about 3 months. Yeah.
And then on the way back, what was the conversation like?
We both were struck with the idea that in South Carolina, we very seldom ever met someone who hadn't been in a church or been exposed. Here, we met nobody who had. And so we thought maybe we ought to ask the Lord if we could be more strategic in another part of the world. And so we began to pray about that, if God would have us do that. We had 2 small kids. We had a 3-year-old and 8-month-old. And so for the next 4 or 5 years, we prayed about it. I took a position of recruiting for East Germany, developing summer teams for East Germany to go in there. I headed that. And
from the United
States. I made another couple. I'm sorry?
From the United States?
Okay. South Carolina adopted East Germany. Our expansion campuses, we sent students into that in the summer. We recruited them to go in there and do what I did. And so it was fun for me. I liked the challenge of it. I felt like we were meeting a need.
Well, and that's what you were doing in the U.S.
But with a different audience.
Right. Now you were taking it, and you were going to take U.S. kids and you were going to move them to Germany.
Just for summer, just for short-term summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you gave them your playbook.
I directed them. We trained them in what to do and how to do it. And we sent them into these German cities that had universities. By the way,
that's a very important principle too, is teach a model that works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In business, we see this all the time. I hear people say, I'm going to hire a salesperson to sell my product. Well, if you don't know how to sell your product,
you can't teach
even if you're the worst salesman in the world, if you don't know how to sell your product, you can't hire somebody to figure it out.
That's right.
Okay. It takes too long and people quit. So you did the same thing. You said, I did this firsthand. I went to the Citadel. I went to name the company, the College of Charleston, or whatever. I did this, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't work, and that's what you taught. That's exactly really important. That's critical. Okay, go ahead.
We prepared our teams well, and we would send them in the summers. They would camp in campgrounds in tents. It was a terrible. It was terrible. But that
shows me you're a pretty good salesman. All right.
Well, we had some people that came back there with a much different view of the world. I did too. I never looked at the world the same after that.
And how did it change your view?
To realize that there were people out there that knew zero about Jesus and never been in a church, never read a Bible. And I thought, hey, maybe we can help here. We can do something here. And so we began.
Did you find them to be very different besides that piece, or did you say, seems like they're the same like me, except they're just in a different location?
That's what I think about students and business people. They're similar all over the world. They may come from a different culture.
So the difference was the faith aspect.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so in 1993, we decided we believed God was at least giving us an okay to go to this part of the world. We had 4 kids by then. And so we applied for a long-term assignment in Eastern Europe. And I changed target audience. I said, let's look at a different audience. I was made the community director for Prague in the Czech Republic. We were interested in the Czech Republic because Lisa's grandfather, her great-grandparents immigrated from the Czech Republic to the U.S. Her grandfather spoke Czech fluently. He was a lawyer in Chicago, a very good one. But he spoke Czech fluently. So we had Czech roots there. So we've met some of her relatives there in Prague that have us on their family tree. And so anyway, we were interested in Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia, at that time, it was Czechoslovakia. And it was a tough country, one of the most atheistic countries in the world. And so we thought, well, we applied for a position in community. Cru had either student or community. This.
When you left, before you left, do you remember how much now you had a wife and 4 kids?
Young kids.
How much was your fundraising budget at that time?
A lot more. A lot more. We raised probably, at that time, I was probably raising close to $6,000 or $7,000 a month or more at that point. And this includes salary and ministry reimbursable expenses.
Yeah, so you're talking about $80,000 a year, raising that money, not $600 a month. Okay.
Yeah, a lot more.
Now this is 10x what you were raising before when you started.
A lot more. Yeah, a lot more. But when you go overseas, you're legit. All of a sudden, you're a real missionary when you go overseas. It was amazing. People look at you totally different. Like, oh man, you're real now, And I
love that. When you go overseas and you're a legit ministry.
You're a legit missionary.
What is it? You said missionary. I
They were
think that's
missionary.
great. I think that's great. Okay, go ahead.
They would never see me as a missionary at the University of South Carolina. But
Right.
when you go overseas, you're a missionary. And anyway, we wanted to work in that community. You tell me on my time, Charlie, but in that community structure is where I began to really, it was a huge response. If it wasn't student, it was community. It was way too big. And so I began to think, where's the strategic area in a community? And I felt like the business, professional, entrepreneur area was the most strategic to work in. And so we began to define our target audience much more clearly.
How did you
in
choose
that community.
that? Why did you choose that? What did you see that made you believe that?
I felt like they were, I've always thought students and business people are two of the most influential that can make a broader impact on society if you can develop in that area. And I still do. I think they're.
Yeah, but you were a student guy from the beginning. Why all of a sudden?
No business background.
Right. So how did you come to and say, it really needs to be business people here in the Czech Republic?
Because I felt like they were the most strategic in the community structure to make a difference. This was Prague now. We were focusing on Prague. Prague's the most strategic city in Czech Republic, 1.2 million. It is the key city in that country. And so I didn't have a clue how to work with business people, but Cru had some things that were helpful. I had a ministry called Priority Associates in the U.S. that worked with business and professional people. And I got involved with some of their teams, like Raleigh, North Carolina. I knew some people there. We began to develop a partnership. I began to study their ministry a little bit there, what they were doing, how they did it. And there was some principles we could easily use in Prague, and just a different
well, how
place.
do you do this? I understood when you were went to you keep using the Citadel as an example. You said I looked at churches that students would go to, and I looked at Bible study groups that they might have or whatever. So here you are in Prague. You don't know anything really about Eastern Europe, and it's okay. It's going to be business people. What do you do next? There's business people everywhere. Every time you walk from your apartment to your office, you've passed 30 businesses. Okay. So, right. I mean, how do you, where do you get started with something like that?
Well, I will say this. I'd been there for several years before I began to really focus on business people. My first 2 years,
okay.
my first 2 years were language learning. I did nothing. Campus Crusade assigned me to study Czech for 2 years. That was my full-time job. And so, and that was not enough. 2 years was not enough to learn Czech, but that was my job, to learn Czech, so I could work more. You need the language is helpful, and so I studied Czech my first 2 years, actually my first 3 years almost. Although I did some basic ministry things, I primarily studied the language and tried to learn it. And then after that, about my fourth year, I started with people that had been involved in a student ministry with us there in Prague that were now in the work, they were in business. Some of them were in, and they already knew our ministry, they already knew Cru. And so I got a list of several people there that I could begin to interact with, tell them we're going to do, our goal is to develop a ministry of evangelism discipleship with business professional people, entrepreneurs. And so a number of them plugged in with us a little bit. That was a starting point. We began a big thing that helped me start. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Jesus Film strategy. It's a huge it's a big strategy for Cru and around the world. And it's billions of people have been exposed to the gospel through the Jesus Film around the world. And we were doing the Jesus Film strategy in the Czech Republic, but we'd never done a campaign for Prague. And Prague is the capital key city there. So about 2003 or 4, we planned a year-long campaign of the Jesus Film in Prague, and it was well organized and well done. We worked at it. We had our ministry headed it. We had a Czech guy on our team who was the coordinator for the project, and we involved 40 churches, 40 evangelical. Most were evangelical churches that worked with us. We developed a prayer strategy, a publicity strategy, and we developed 32 venues around the city of Prague, like movie theaters or culture houses where you could show the movie. And we did a 3-week publicity campaign. We did some training in how to follow up people, how to share the gospel. And we did a 3-week publicity campaign. And then we showed the Jesus film in these 32 locations 130 times over a period of about 3 weeks. And it was a big time campaign. And
Man,
we had 25,000.
You tore a page out of the Billy Graham Society.
Very similar. Very similar.
This is how they did it. Yeah, how they would do the tent revivals and all that kind of things. Engage all the churches, mobilize them, get the people trained, all that. Yeah, pretty interesting.
It was the best thing I've done since I've been there. It was exciting. We had 25,000 Czechs came to see the Jesus film, which was remarkable in Prague. And 5,000 indicated some type of decision.
Wow.
It was really big time for that area of the world. And it was exciting. What was great for me, though, is on the comment cards, we differentiated. We had student or like business, professional. They could check that. And so after the campaign, I got 300 cards of business people that said they were interested in talking in some capacity relating to the Jesus film. Boy, that was gold for me. I mean, I got 300 contacts.
That's what ignited the ministry then.
I started right there working with that, calling people, seeing if they want to meet. And it was fun. I don't know how much time we have today. I think I'm getting over your time frame here, but I remember one guy I called. My Czech was terrible. When I said Dobrý den, they knew I wasn't Czech, but I could speak. You can imagine I got a Southern accent and I'm speaking Czech. It's really crazy. But anyway.
Well, let's just say it made you unforgettable. Okay.
Everybody knew I was not Czech. Let me tell you that. But this guy, I said about 5 words in Czech. He said on the phone now, he said, "Oh, you're not Czech, are you?"
And he said it in Czech.
Yeah, but okay. He said, if you want to, you speak English. He said, I speak good English. He did. He spoke English like I did. He worked for he was part of the Czech embassy in London. And he was a part of the diplomatic corps. Great guy. And we had a great conversation. I said, look, would you like to meet sometime? He said, yeah, I love it. And so we set an appointment with him, sat down, went through the gospel with him. He was so ready. He said, I've been thinking about this. The Jesus film was really impressive to me. And he said, I want to become a Christian. He prayed to receive Christ with me. And just
what an encouragement for you.
Oh, it was. And I followed him up for a couple, 8 months, and he went back to London. But it was so much fun. I had some of the greatest conversations because, we had these warm contacts. These people said, yeah, I want to talk. I've seen this film. I want to talk about it. And so I got a guy, Peter McCulloch. I met him. He's a small business owner in Prague. I met him through the Jesus film in 2005 as a contact, as a follow-up. And I shared the gospel with him. Czechs are slow to make decisions. They're really slow. So I met him several times. We talked about the same thing. About the 5th meeting, he made a decision for Christ. He is in one of my groups today. He's part of one of our ministry teams and getting ready to start his own group. But I met him in 2005 through the Jesus film contact. Still with us today.
Did you ever, you've been doing this a long time out there, okay? And I'm sure that because of your entrepreneurial, because you're like you said, once you got into that area management, entrepreneurial kind of thing, developer of new ministries, if you will, you said, man, I just really love that, okay?
I like that.
So that says Terry's an idea guy. Terry likes to break new ground. So I'm sure you had a lot of new programs that you had introduced that were probably copied or used, okay, by other Eastern Bloc countries and their leaders and all that. But did you ever get to a point, you and your wife and kids and all, where it's just like, what are we doing? I'm getting a little tired here. This is, because when you start, it's all this, right? It's all hope, ideas and all that. But at some point, it sort of flattens out and it just becomes what you do that day, right?
That's true.
And every day bleeds into the next. How do you keep yourself And that happens in business. Okay. Everything is, the start is the presence of all hope. Okay. And then you've got to, at some point, maintain that hope, or you become hopeless and the business starts to decline. It's just not you can't hire anybody because you're not exciting. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you tell me how you got there once, and then tell me how you got out of it.
I think I agree with you. I've been in this a good while. I think one thing, I'll say one thing that really keeps me going, I'm excited about what I do. I like what I do. And what I've never gotten over is to see how Jesus Christ can change somebody's life from the inside out. I have never gotten over that. It amazes me that I have a small part in helping introducing somebody to Jesus, and Jesus can change their life, their marriage, their priorities, can make them a better businessman, a better manager, everything. When they come to know Christ in a real way, he makes them the kind of person they were created to be. And I've never gotten over that. I love it with Eastern Europeans, with Czechs, because some of them come out of such, they don't know anything about spiritual things, nothing. So it's like you're painting the portrait from a blank slate. And it's in some ways that's really refreshing, because they're not bogged down with kind of religious things from the past sometimes that pull you back. And I've got some rough customers. I got one guy I work with, been married 3 times. He's 37 years old. He became a Christian after his 3rd marriage. He owns a security company, small business owner. And, Jesus has changed his life. He's a different guy. He's just a different guy.
So that's what keeps you going.
Yeah, it does. It's been exciting for me to be involved in that. And I'd say, I don't know. I don't know that I have so many flat times. I understand what you're saying. I don't know that I've had a real flat time.
Well, don't let me talk. Don't invent one. If you don't have them, then that's good. And it could go back to what you're saying. I never lost the excitement for what I'm doing, because
that's exactly
the
right.
results are so amazing, is what I'm hearing you say.
It is. I love to see Jesus change a life. I wish I were 25 years younger. I'm ready to go for more. My age is catching up with me now. But
Jerry, we have to end this. But, I love what you said. Ending with that comment of, how do you stay fresh? You just continue to remember, or you continue to do the work that was so important, okay, because you continue to see results, and those results, okay, or continue to keep you excited, right? It's
absolutely
what Christ can do in a man or woman's life who commit themselves to Christ is amazing. Total, they're changed, their lives are changed. But I like what you said, which is they can finally then become the person that God designed them to be.
Exactly
because
right.
They are reconciled to God. That's just such a powerful message. And I think it's so true of, also we can apply it in business, different than speaking about Jesus, but that we're out there. This is what businesses try to do. They want to know that they're making people's lives better. Mm-hmm. I once heard the Koch brother, I can't remember which of the Koch brothers. These are these very, very wealthy guys that are very big in politics too, but they have one of the largest private companies in the United States, and great business people. And of course, it's a conglomerate, if you imagine. And the guy made a comment. He says, the reason we're in business is simple. We want to improve people's lives, and we just want to make a profit doing it. That's it. If we're not improving their lives, and we're not making a profit doing it, we're not going to do it anymore.
Why do it?
And so that's you're from. I can build that bridge between the two, the missionary side and the business side. And it's the same thing. I'm in it to introduce people to Jesus Christ, because I know he will improve their lives and give them eternal life. And there's nothing better than that.
Exactly right. Yeah. And I don't know. Do I need to start? I had a quick thing I wanted to add to this. Yeah. Something I've learned, Charlie, and I'm learning still. I shouldn't say learn. I'm learning, is that as much as I love to see the difference Jesus makes in a person's life, and that motivates me to do what I do, I think what I'm learning more and more is that for me as a professional missionary or full-time Christian worker, it's far more important for me to know Jesus in a deep, personal way than it is what I do for him. And that's going to sound like it's wiping out what I just said, but I have found that I get more satisfaction and purpose from my relationship with him than what I do for him, so to speak. And
boy, there's so many Christians that need to learn that lesson, because I get caught up with that. I remember there was a friend of mine who's passed away, and he was a do guy. Yet he would stand up in front of groups and talk about the love of God and how Jesus, loved you so much, he died for you. And just, you need to let that love wash over you. And I would hear him speak and I would be like, yeah, this is what it means to be in personal relationship. And then we would be a week later and he's talking about all the things to do, and it would wear me out. And here you are coming back to that at the end of our little talk here. So what is it that you've learned? Saying,
what really challenged me was Philippians chapter 3, verse 10, verses 7 through 11. Paul writes there, he talks about, first of all, in that chapter, all the things that he had done, all the things he Pharisee, Hebrew of Hebrews, and here's a guy that's probably one of the greatest Christians who ever lived. And in that passage, what Paul talks about, Philippians 3:10, he says, I want to know him, the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death. What Paul's talking about there, he makes no mention of ministry. Nothing, not a word. He's saying, my mission is I want to know Jesus in a deep and personal way. That's my mission statement in life. And he was very effective in what he did, but that's not what drove him. What really motivated him was that relationship with Christ. And that's what I want. That's my mission statement, is to know him in a deep and personal way, in a way that makes my life change in the right way, and to help other people know him like that. And that is what I found is much more meaningful to me than, 10 people trusted Christ. That's great. I love that. I'm doing that. But that's not really what should motivate me. It's to know him, to let him live through me.
But
the power of the
big
Spirit.
thing is, when you have that deep of a relationship, in other words, you fill yourself up, that's going to come out.
It comes out
anybody
in the right way. In the right way.
They're going to, and you do it because you want them to enjoy what you enjoy.
Exactly right.
That love of
and you
God.
know what?
That's great.
What the Bible says, if Jesus says, if you hold me up, I will draw them in to myself. It's not about how great I am. It's about holding him.
Yeah.
He does that work. And I'm learning that. I wish I'd learned that more earlier, even that is a life lesson.
Part of our maturing in our relationship with Jesus. So Terry, thank you so much for this time. This has absolutely been brilliant. You are, in fact, an entrepreneur for Jesus. And I think there's a lot of lessons in your life that have been learned that can be applied, to people who are interested in being in ministry, who are in ministry, who are missionaries, but also for entrepreneurs in business. I mean, these are fundamentals that you covered that are extremely important. So why am I doing it? What gets me excited? Who's my audience? How do I network? Where do I gain support? What new programs can go in place? How do you introduce them? I mean, you had one after the other great ideas. There's going to be so much people to draw from this. So thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, for having me.
I appreciate it. I'll close us out here. So there you have it, folks. Terry Brown, Entrepreneur for Jesus. There's so many lessons to be learned here. I said that in tying it up with Terry, but take some time, go through this, take notes, apply it to your business, build something great, and honor God. I hope that you too have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, as Terry and I do. It has changed our lives, our marriages, our families, and our businesses. So God bless you all. And don't forget to subscribe at paparelli.com so that you don't miss an episode. You take care.